Welcome, folks. My name is Joshua Gordon. I am the community editor at theleadpastor.com, where we are working to help pastors to lead faithfully and cultivate thriving churches, which is why I'm super stoked to be sitting there with friend, question mark, Jim Brown.
For sure, friend.
Yeah, we've been in each other's orbits for quite a long time. I think actually, and you know this, but the first time I encountered you was through the best-selling book, The Imperfect Board Member, which my dad gave me to read. I was like 17 or 18. I don't know how old I was, but I was like too young, but I still found it very, very interesting. And you've got a new book coming out, The Imperfect CEO. And I think there's so much good stuff in both your books. And I'm
Thank you.
excited to unpack that specifically for the context of pastors working with their boards for that thriving church. Why don't you give me a bit of a snapshot of yourself, what you're up to, and then I've got a ton of questions I'm stoked to dive into. So,
Sure. Hey, well, let me say, you talked about way back you read the book. I'm just finishing the manuscript. I plan to send it today for the 20th anniversary edition of that book, The Imperfect
wow.
Board Member. So, yeah, that's sobering. 20 years have passed since it came out. But that has given me 20 years to work with leaders of all kinds of organizations. Now, to be clear, my professional practice is primarily with boards and CEOs, management teams of large companies.
Yeah.
But to give you a little more color, the truth is I'm a absolutely committed follower of Jesus Christ. I love his church. I think there's no better answer in the world than a healthy church delivering the gospel message to the world. So the opportunity to work with pastors, leaders in churches, the audience of this podcast, it just warms my heart because I want to help every church be healthy.
Yeah. I mean, you've been involved with church leadership as well, like on a board level and other levels as well. So this isn't something that you're theorizing about either. It's like you've been kind of in the trenches there for a good long time.
Yeah, I think I'm up to 40 years of church board experience now. Yeah.
Well, I turned 40 this year. So you've been
Okay.
doing it for as long as I've been alive. So we can cut that out if you want me to, but that's no, I mean, so I absolutely agree with you that when there is a church that is thriving and impacting its community, there are like wild things that can happen that no strategic plan could ever produce, right? It's like the
Yeah.
God delivering abundantly more than we can ask or imagine. However, there's wisdom. There are things that we can do as church leaders to kind of set the stage to create an environment where that kind of thing can happen a lot more. And so, one of the questions I have for you is, as you're in conversations with pastors, with church boards, what are some of the major issues that you see most often arising between pastors and their boards?
Okay. I'm going to say a really big one is that in the church we have this family feel,
Mm,
and we kind of want everyone to be just friendly, close, like we're all part of the same family. And sadly, that translates into a lot of niceness rather than a lot of truth. And I'm not talking about biblical truth. I'm talking about us telling each other what we are truly seeing or feeling.
mm,
So pastors have to survive in an environment where nice people tell them nice things, but then they don't necessarily say the same thing about that in the other circles.
mm.
And that, of course, is disastrous on a board.
Yeah.
If your board is telling you, those have been some really good services for the last month or two, thanks for that, Pastor. But in other conversations, they're saying, I can't believe that he preaches so long. Can't he get his message a little tighter? Or are we going to talk about those things over and over? Like, goodness, can't we move on? All of that complaining happens way too much. And I mean, it's too much in churches. The idea that it happens with board members, that's kind of agonizing, Josh. Wouldn't you agree that we should know better and we should do better?
Mhm.
So they don't call it niceness. They call it love. In the name of
Yeah.
love, we treat people nicely, but don't actually tell the truth. And that means the real conversations, the hard but necessary conversations, often don't happen till just a little bit too late. Is
Yeah.
that too vague? Like
No, I
I'm
mean, yeah, what's come to my mind is sounds like you're talking about trust in a way where, right, where I trust my safety with you and your safety with me enough to brave a difficult conversation with you, even though it's not going to be nice.
yeah,
It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be messy,
yeah,
right? And I
yeah,
think maybe it comes back. I mean, I think what you said about people using the word love, like that's actually not what love is, like at all.
no,
Like, and I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, but somebody who's, comes to me and gives me a hard truth, they're willing to to step into a conversation where I might actually get mad at them. I might actually be offended. And so I'm not thinking the best of them, but they're willing to experience that for my benefit. And so I
right.
guess I hear what you said. And I mean, that's important for any healthy relationship. But I think at a board level, if the trust isn't there, the willingness to be honest, even if it doesn't feel nice, man, like I'm sure you can tell me lots of stories of what happens downstream of that,
Yeah.
And so when you're coming into a board, then is it most or in a other consulting role or some, is it most often at the too late stage? Like, is there truly a too late stage? If there is, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it could be too late for some people. So I had a conversation this morning where a board member has been inappropriately going around the CEO and talking to another very senior member of the management team, campaigning for that
Mm,
person to extend the contract for his daughter. Talk about a
oh,
conflict of interest. So a
yeah,
board member trying to get somebody else to make sure that the daughter keeps a contracting role, way out of line.
yeah,
But the person believes that it's right to the point that I think it's too late. I think that it will be necessary for that person to leave the board.
mm,
And that won't be easy either for a whole lot of
yeah,
different reasons.
yeah, yeah,
But the beautiful thing about Jesus is until that last moment, until he returns and gathers his own, it's actually never too late. He's a
yeah,
redeeming God. For the most part, nothing is beyond redemption, and
yeah.
that's true in leadership as well.
I think my own experiences as a pastor and relating with our board. I mean, we've had to work very hard because there's a team of us pastors that interact with our board, and we've had to work very hard over the 7 years that our church has been around now to develop a a culture of mutual respect, care, honesty, and like that kind of openness. Every church and every pastor, their board should have that, but dang it, it gets really hard sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what are some maybe errors that pastors may be inadvertently making when it comes to relating with their board? And then on the flip side of that, what are things that they can do, habits that they can develop, practices that they can slip into to help them to cultivate a really great relationship with their board?
I'd like to put that on pause for a moment and go back to another big example of problems that church boards have.
Yeah, yeah,
Because what your question just triggered for me was, again, especially in churches, people around the board table, they usually have some other role that they carry. They're not just the board member, they are also the leader of men's discipleship, or
yeah.
they are in charge of the worship team. And there's nothing wrong with that unless those roles show up at the table, because that's not why
Mm,
they're there.
yeah.
So what I see is, instead of them being there pressing to understand what's best for the whole church and pressing to discover God's will for the whole church. They campaign for what will work best for their ministry area.
Mhm.
And now the pastor is trying to orchestrate it's almost like a competition. Instead of these board members working together to oversee the whole, they're almost working against each other to get
Mm.
what they want in their area of ministry, which, oh boy, everybody's got the wrong hat on. Not everybody. All the board members who are letting that happen have the
Yeah.
wrong hat on.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying there, like individual board members can start jockeying for position, or better way of saying it is like advocating for their ministries rather
Yeah,
than fighting for the church at large. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the pastor, instead of having a team of people who's helping them lead this precious bride of Christ to be most fruitful, they're they're trying to manage. It's almost like they're managing egos. And I'm not saying that that's the
Mhm.
way it quite shows up, but yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a misunderstanding. And there's lots of board members who think, no, I'm on the board because I lead Christian education in our church. And
Yeah.
and their governance structure might even say that. That's
Yeah.
how we decide who's on the board. Well, that's how you got the seat, but that isn't your role.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So
I'm gonna press there too. Sorry.
yeah.
What is their role? I'd like to wrap that up in two very clear words. The role of board members is direct and protect. Direct the organization, the ministry, and protect the best interests of the owners of the organization. And I hope that we all believe that God is the ultimate owner of the church.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
scripture is clear that Jesus paid the price to buy the church with his
Yeah.
own blood. So
Yeah.
the ultimate owner of the church is God. The job of the board is to discern together what God's will is for that church and ensure that that will gets fulfilled, protecting the interests of the owner.
Yeah. So then, I mean, there's the legal liability aspects, and I've heard direct and protect before. Often, I kind of like how you tied in like protecting. I mean, it didn't technically say protecting God's interests, but kind of sort of like that. But also, then
Yep,
there's like, I guess part of that would be protecting the church in a legal liability kind of like element as well, right?
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about ownership, and this is one of the reasons that I'm excited about the new version of the Imperfect Board Member, because one of the brand new chapters in that book is specifically about governing churches and charities,
Yeah.
and it breaks out the understanding of the owners as there's the spiritual owner, there's the legal owner, and then there's the moral owner.
Yeah.
So the legal owner is defined in your constitution or your however your church is governed, your bylaws. Sometimes it's the congregation, sometimes it's a small group of trustees. There isn't a right and wrong answer to that, but you better find out what the answer is for your church
Yeah.
because you're legally required to function in service to those owners' interests.
Yeah.
But then you've got the broader moral ownership, as in all of the people in your congregation who some may be just interested in God, not yet even followers of Jesus. But then you've got your community, your neighbors geographically. We're either going to notice what they are thinking and needing, or we're going to ignore it. And that usually doesn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. So, I know, I'm sure you've got like a vast repertoire of stories. Can you maybe tell a story about a church where you come to kind of come into the situation and maybe there's a misunderstanding either on the board or from the pastor around roles and around responsibility? And what are the steps maybe that were required to correct that and to kind of put things on the right track again?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, no names will be shared.
It's fine.
There are a lot of churches that have like a dozen committees. They've got
Mm,
the Christian Education Committee, the Property and Finance Committee, Stewardship Committee, whatever, the Fall Retreat Committee. And there's nothing wrong with having all those committees. What I am disappointed to see so often is that if there's a committee, it must report to the board. And
mm,
I'm wanting to say, shake our heads. No, there's different kinds of committees. Some of them are board committees, but most of them are actually operating committees, and
mm,
they shouldn't report to the board at all. There's not many things that should be actually board committees. Like there should be I would call it audit and risk committee. Most churches call it a finance committee.
okay.
The problem with finance committee, Joshua, is that it says more than is intended to be on a board committee.
Mm,
Most finance committees become the finance department. So the committee does the budget, creates the budget for the church, and that is not a board function. The board should approve and confirm that the budget is being followed, but the board should not be the creator of
mm,
the budget. Property and finance, a kind of dirty little secret in the church world is that in a lot of churches, the board is just a figurehead, and the people that control the church are the property and finance committee because they control the money.
yeah,
Well, that sure sounds very worldly, and it's absolutely incorrect what
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of a story where I met with a pastor who felt like he just couldn't keep up with all the different directions that were being given to him
Mm,
because all of those committee meetings would happen, and he's supposed to be a visitor, not necessarily a member, but a adherent to all of those committees. But at the end of every meeting, each of them told him something he should do.
yeah,
So, a week goes by, there's 3 different committee meetings, and he's got 14 to-dos,
yeah.
none of which are actually the highest priorities of his mission in leading the church. But because those committees are chaired by members of the board, the pastor often feels they therefore are absolutely accountable because the board members are their ultimate boss. Not quite true.
Yeah.
The board is their boss, but individual board members are not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So I have to come in and help them understand that there's roles for committees and there's ways that those committees should relate to the leadership structure, most of them not to the board at all,
Mm,
and how the pastor relates to them. So I'm
yeah.
thinking of an example where this was eye-opening to the people in the room. It was the board and the pastor together, not quickly accepted by everyone. Some of them were, I mean, they've lived this for years and years. But the ones that kind of saw the light, fortunately started to blaze the trail of moving as a whole church toward that.
Yeah.
Again, some of those board members did not survive it, as in
Yeah.
my challenge to them was you should decide if you're going to chair the committee or be on the board.
Mm,
If you can't make sure that you're only being a board member in a board meeting, you should stop being a committee chair if you're going to stay on the board.
yeah.
But if you rather be a committee chair, that's great. You just shouldn't stay on the board. And a few of them did not stay on the board.
Yeah. 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 So it seems to me from what you're saying that a whole lot of problems arise when the church leaders A don't understand the role the board's supposed to play and B don't actually abide by the role the board is supposed to play.
Yeah.
So in a situation where there's a pastor listening to this and maybe some of the descriptors that you've been throwing out are like, oh, this is feeling like it resonates, or like, I think I've got a board. It's not operating at like in a healthy way. Is that something a pastor can fix on their own?
I'm kind of chuckling because I have long lost count of the number of pastors who have sent me a note or crossed paths and said, Jim, thank you for writing that book, because I can give that book to every board member and it will say things that I wish I could say, but I could not get away with. And I don't mean they're bad things. I mean, they're being very clear about what the role of the board is. But
Yeah.
if it's coming from the senior pastor, it sounds like it's the pastor telling board members what to do, and that's not the role of the senior pastor.
Yeah.
Collectively, the board is supposed to oversee the senior pastor. So why would the senior pastor be telling me what to do?
Yeah.
Well, maybe because he's trying to help or she's trying to help, but it doesn't usually get taken that way. So the great thing about the book is it's a objective third party, so to speak, that's delivering a message. Like tens of thousands of church board leaders have read the book.
Yeah.
It has made an impact. That's one of the reasons why this new edition of that book is adding this chapter, particularly for churches and charities, because I'm trying to be very intentional to help those people. And I love the church. I actually want to see churches do very well, even to the
Yeah.
point that you and I have talked. I've just recently created a resource called Leading a Healthy Church, which comes at the leadership culture of the church. It's more an extension of the Imperfect CEO book.
Yes.
But
So how do people
again,
get their hands on that 40-page resource you've created?
that would be, as much as we want people to get the books, the Imperfect CEO doesn't come out till May, and the new version of the other book isn't until September. Chances are we've got listeners who want some help right now.
Yeah.
So if you would go to LinkedIn and find me, just search for at author Jim Brown, and you'll find my LinkedIn record. You can message me, DM me the word church, and I will send this resource, PDF. I'll personally make sure that goes to you like within hours. And as I explained to you, it's like a 38-page booklet that goes deep. It's more than any church leader will use right away, but there are pieces that I need to read this part. This will help me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so again, at author Jim Brown on LinkedIn, DM me the word church and we'll get that resource sent to you directly.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading that myself. So I'll send you that DM, Jim.
Okay,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So okay, so if you like rewind the clock back to X number of years, what is something, maybe a misconception perhaps, that you held that you had to learn or unlearn, specifically around like board dynamics and obviously within a church context?
Yeah. I'm gonna say that it really got caught in the title of that first book. That's why my next book continues in the theme. So the imperfect board member, now the imperfect CEO. And it's that idea that we're actually all imperfect. And I'm not blaming anybody, but somehow I got this weird sense that, yeah, but if you're a board member, you really should have it all figured out. You really
Yeah.
should have all the answers. So I felt pressure. I better pray longer. I better study the Bible more. I need to show up at board meetings with all the answers and almost be perfect, even though I can't be. And there's this impossibility in that whole picture. So to the point that I'm really a champion right now with the upcoming release of my new book of what we're calling the imperfect leadership movement,
Mhm.
that all of us would embrace the truth. We are not perfect.
Yeah.
No one actually expects us to be perfect.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do it all. But the beautiful thing about God's design is that there are people around us. He's actually invited them into the orbit. And the question for us is, are we going to invite them into our circle so that we can let their strengths cover our weaknesses?
Yes.
And what I'm talking about, Josh, is a level of vulnerability, of self-awareness so that I can sit with the people that I lead with and say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Please forgive me."
Yeah.
Or, "Hey, I don't actually know how to do this. Can you help me?" It also includes being a little bit more open. This
Mhm.
isn't so much of a problem in church circles, it's more of a problem in corporate world where we have our personal life and we keep that out of the office. Like, that's not to be shared. But the truth is our personal life affects us every day. So, like, if I've got a one of my kids is ill, seriously, that's affecting my function every day. But most leaders are scared to be that open about
Mhm.
what's going on in their real life. Most leaders want to show up like they really have it together. And and we don't. We don't have it
Yeah.
all together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the message is embrace our imperfection and trust God to work through the strengths that he's given us in spite of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's such a beautiful picture, and it requires reframing what personal success looks like, I believe.
Yeah.
Because if my concept of personal success is everything I do, uh, if it's not a knock out of the park, it's at least, a double. I'm like
Yeah.
on right. And I mean, there's an element of competence that's important, right? But at the same time, I mean, if that's how I'm judging myself, if that's how I'm judging other people, then anything that is going to fracture that image, that mask, like I'm gonna hide it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not at all hard to find stories of prominent church leaders who've been hiding something for years and years and years, and then it comes to light and everything's crumbling.
Yes.
And that's where I think that the beauty of embracing that my status is imperfect and being willing to bring that to the fore is that I don't have to hide.
Right.
And I mean, I just think about the pastors out there who are struggling with parenting or struggling with their finances or struggling with their marriage or who knows what else.
Yeah.
But then who can they go to because they're in a situation, essentially the board's in charge of their salary. Like, how do you
Yeah.
go to ask for help? Like, ugh, it just seems like, and so I just, yeah, I have another friend of mine who talks about the same thing you're describing. He talks about like a high trust culture, like a culture where protective love is the
Right.
byword, where like,
Yeah.
right, like I'm willing to allow you, like you said, allow you into my circle and show you the secrets I don't really want to show you, but for the purpose of you being able to protect me.
This is a tricky piece because I really do love the idea that a board can care for the person, not just oversee them.
Yes.
Sadly, we've seen where that line gets crossed inappropriately, and
Yeah.
there are too many stories of church leadership that protected the pastor who was doing something inappropriate and then minimized the people that were being injured
Yeah.
and impacted by that.
Yeah.
So it is not a simple thing.
No.
Honestly, if I were a senior pastor, I would be getting a couple of mentors outside of the church to be the ones that I go to about this is where I feel like I'm missing it. This is the worst thing in my world right now. Not that I'm lying or hiding things from my board, but the stuff gets dealt with quickly without it possibly becoming a distraction or disqualifier in somebody's mind. Like,
But yeah, like I don't, if I'm,
we all sin. So I'm
yeah,
going to confess my sins, but sometimes a certain sin is immediate disqualification in the minds of some leaders and some
yeah,
board members.
yeah.
Well, nah,
And
anyway,
how can I be honest if I'm afraid my honesty is going to become ammunition used
right.
against me down the road, right? And so I think I'm an idealist at heart, a romantic, right? And so I think I have the ideal is that there's a really healthy, vibrant relationship between a pastor and their board where a pastor can be open and they can be vulnerable, and the board is caring for the pastor as a person, but also balancing protecting the church as a whole. Because sometimes there are things that a pastor needs to get through that you shouldn't be in charge of the church right now. But we're gonna
Yeah.
like loving you as a person does not
Yeah.
necessarily mean stay in your role, right? Like, and
Right.
that's where like kind of circling back that tough love that we discussed earlier,
Mhm.
the front end.
And wouldn't it be great if we as church leadership people could see that in a bigger way? Because if that's the case, the pastor shouldn't be leading the church right now. Can we love that person enough to keep paying them so that they're going to focus their energy on solving the issue of their life, not trying to pay their bills?
Yeah. Yeah.
But boy, there's been a sorry number of people
Yeah.
thrown to the curb, and that's, yeah, wow, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I always hate wrapping up conversations like this because I like them. I feel like they're deep. There's good things going on. Um, but maybe to wrap up, can you tell a redemptive story, a story where things turned out great? You know?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a story of a church that was, uh, I would say, fading. It was, I remember a way a pastor described it. He says, our church hasn't been bad. It's just lost one member a year for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, that gets to a point where it's pretty serious, right? But
Yeah.
it's just one at a time. And
Yeah.
so this church was fading, um, but they dared to imagine, what God's trying to do in this part of our world, the community, he wants to do it a little differently than the way we thought it was supposed to look.
Yeah.
What the board bravely did was the pastor said, I'm going to resign on the condition that we appoint, in this case, it was two young men in their 20s to become the leaders of this church and to work with another church closely so that they could just make out a different path. Well,
Yeah.
this took a lot of bravery for the board to imagine. We're essentially saying what was working was wrong and humbly accept that it's a total rethink. Um, Almost give the keys to the next generation. Anyways, they did it. And that church, this is quite a few years later, like they're 10 times the size that they were.
Wow. Yeah.
They've impacted thousands of people. They've done great things. I can think of too many examples, Josh, of church boards that were in similar situations and they couldn't humble
Yeah.
themselves to do that. And they shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until
Yeah.
they can't find anyone volunteering to be their pastor because there's no money
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Humility is I feel like there's like I was gonna say superpower. I feel like that's a weird way to say it, but like, yeah, I think it's one of those, it's like a currency maybe
Yeah.
in the kingdom of heaven. Like, humility is something that is very special and can open incredible doors, especially when practiced. I think, as you're pointing out, especially when it's practiced like corporately in terms of like a group. And so, yeah, I think it's super cool. I love that story. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
Again,
So,
it's our redemptive
yeah,
Father.
absolutely, absolutely. And the cool thing is that regardless of where the listener, whether it's a pastor or board member, regardless of where they're at, everyone can turn to humility at
Yeah.
any point
Yeah.
and give it to Jesus and like, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to know? And then let him lead the way out, right? And so um super exciting, super encouraging. Man, thank you for this. I think it's a life-giving conversation. It's been really wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and highly recommend to the listener check out the imperfectceobook.com. and you can order in bulk. If I correct, I think you mentioned
Yeah,
there's like a
so
ton of bonuses that come with that, right?
so many bonuses. Even if you get a package of 10 books with which you share with your fellow leaders and board members, it ends up you get something like $2,000 of bonuses on
Yeah,
top of the cost of the book. So
yeah.
yeah,
And absolutely find Jim on LinkedIn at author Jim Brown. DM him the word church. Grab that 38 or 40 page resource. Yeah. But this has been awesome, Jim. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate your time.
pleasure to work with you always, Josh.